So today I've got kind of a wild hair and I kind of want to talk about fully utilizing knowledge. Something I've kind of absorbed over the years is the truly talented woodworkers I admire out there. You know, the ones that are in galleries and stuff like that. It's not necessarily they have more skill than any of us. Because, you know, quite frankly, woodworking is not a hard skill to learn. I mean, the learning curve is really, really steep. I've seen so many examples of content creators that when they first started out making videos, you know, they're saying, oh, I'm doing this as a learning experiment. I'm bring you along. But within a year or something like that, you know, a spoon carver, they dedicated a year to green carving. By the end of that first year, they are really, really good. I mean, it just takes a little bit of effort into learning the skill. It's just basic hand-eye coordination most of the time. It does take a little bit more time to, you know, gather knowledge. But the guys that are really good at it, they apply knowledge. And they apply knowledge from all over the place. So today, I'm going to show you a technique that I've used over the years sparingly. I even showed you on this channel. It's one of the very first videos I ever did. It was on draw boring. I think it's the 4th or 5th video on the channel, 14 or 15 years ago. I'll put a link down below. It's kind of fun to see how far content creators have progressed out there. But it utilizes a technique that I learned in the timber framing that I apply to really fine joinery. And it works like this. You take your tool, you have your wood, and you use brute force. You might think I'm joking there, but I'm really not. It's actually a legitimate woodworking technique. Some people, woodworking, metalworking, it's called the same thing, peening. Now I can see all you metal workers out there, the light bulbs are kind of going off right now because peening is basically deforming wood, generally in a cold process in metalworking with some kind of mechanical force, you know, hitting it with a mallet and you kind of push the metal. Well, timber framers do the same thing. A lot of times when they're joining something up in the air or something like that, if it's not quite fitting right, you might see them pull out a hammer and just kind of beat it until it comes in submission. Now, if you think about it, when you're doing that, you're not really removing any of the wood. You're basically compressing the air inside the wood. The fibers are still there. They're still just as strong, or almost as strong. They're a little bit weaker. But, you know, you put the glue or something like that, they're going to swell up. And if you deform it too much, the glue will swell it back to where it just fits perfectly. And we can use that as woodworkers. In fact, if you look at a lot of the tools specifically designed for woodworking, I'm looking at this expensive mallet I got from Lost Art Press a few years ago. You know, the surfaces are a little bit domed. Even this thing right here I bought in the very first kind of batch of new tools I ever bought. It's a plane adjustment tool. The surface of the brass is slightly domed, and we use that one as a tool to deform the wood in a manner that will make it better for us. Now, in that very first video I talked about, I use this process in draw boring, because if you draw bore a board, you know, the peg has to actually weave itself around. And a telltale sign that you have done it right is that there's going to be a gap on the hole of the peg, a little crescent moon. And I used peening and this very hammer from 14, 15 years ago in combination with a little bit of water to soften the fibers and spread them into the gap, because nobody wants that crescent moon. It's kind of obvious, I don't want to call it a defect, but it's a feature that a lot of people don't quite understand, which is why you see a lot of people peg stuff, which is not as good a mechanical joint as draw boring. But through peening, I can get the look of the lesser quality peg that people actually do want and gain the mechanical strength. It was all about hammering the wood. Now in a second, I'm going to cut a dovetail, and I'll show you how you can use this to fill the gaps in your joinery, which is a first class cut, meaning a joint that has to be very precise and it also has to look good. But I use this technique a lot of times in what they call second class cuts. It's a joint that has to be very, very accurate, but you're not going to see it. For example, mortise and tenon joineries. A lot of times, you know, the mortise is determined by the size of my chisel. I'm using a 1/4 inch, a 3/8 inch, or a 1/2 inch chisel. You cut that out, but, you know, given skills, even though you learn and get better fairly quickly, they might not be perfect. So each joint might be a little bit differently. So let's say you cut the tenons for those joints on something like a table saw or a bandsaw that's fairly accurate, and it just doesn't quite fit. You need to bring it down a little bit more. Well, you could take sandpaper or chisel, or you could peen it. And the advantage of peening it is it compresses the fibers, and then whenever you put glue in it, put it in the mortise, it will swell out just till it fills whatever gap there is. It won't swell out anymore, so you don't have to worry about splitting. So let's cut a quick shoulder. And I want it to be 3/8. I mean tenon. So I'm going to take my mallet that I'm going to be using. Going to give it a strike. That'll tell me both sides. We'll quickly cross-cut the sides. Saw the cheeks. And then measure the results. And what do I have? I have a little less than 3/8 right there. Quite a bit less than 3/8 right there. Right on 3/8 right there. And quite a bit over 3/8 right there. Now y'all know me. My first solution to all problems is to pick up a chisel. But the advantage that having knowledge offers is there are alternatives. And in this situation, I could just come over here, lay that down, grab my mallet, and just compress it. Right on 3/8 on the dot. Slap some glue on it. A lot of times, this is one of those times where you start fitting it and it's just tight, so you just pull it out a few taps and it'll go right in. I think that example is kind of obvious. How about we take a look at that first class cut? I'm going to cut a dovetail off camera, and when we come back, I'll show you the gaps and how we're going to fix it. But before I do that, I'd like to take a quick minute for a sponsor's message, because these kind of sponsors are the ways I help subsidize creating this free content for you. I'm the sponsor. Mallets have gotten a bad rap in the modern woodworking realm simply as a means of transferring power, little more than a weight on the end of a stick. That is not how they've traditionally been used. A general purpose woodworking mallet was a force of control in addition to power. If all you want with power, you really wanted a maul. A mallet enhances your ability to control strikes, to transferring power to your chisel. Not only is it a source of good force, holding it by the handle and transferring all that power to the weight in a way that's ergonomic. It's not just holding a straight handle for dear life and hoping you strike it. You want it to be able to pivot in your wrist, so with little movement, you can transfer a lot of force. But most of us aren't transferring that much force every single strike. What we would rather do is enhance our control. Hence, a properly designed mallet allows you to handle the mass of the mallet so that you can control the strikes without having to focus that hard. This is what you're generally doing when you're clearing out waste of dovetails and tenons and finger joints and stuff like that. But if you need even more enhanced control, you want to shift your pivot point to the top, because this dome curve on a properly designed mount allows it not only to sit flat, but it focuses the smallest of strikes. So you can increase your power as you need to, whether you're carving leathers, clearing out a groove, or adding a small chamfer. A mallet is not just an instrument of power. It's an instrument of control if it's designed properly. And mine are now available on my website, while supplies last. Man, it's been a long time since I've cut one of these. It might actually be a full year. So let's see how I did. That side's a little tight. Okay, there we go. I got a little gap right there, little gap right there, little gap right there, little gap right there. Perfectly suitable for a, drawer or something like that. But if you want to show that kind of stuff off, you got to fill those. Now this gap right here is big enough that I would generally run my saw down there to make it all the way even and put a wedge in that one. But let's see if we can improve it with just peening. Now when you peen wood, you actually need something really solid to sit on. So I like using my leg vise, but I don't put the dovetail or anything I'm peening in the vise. I figure out some way that I can clamp it so it's impacting the workbench. I'm going to start with this gap right here because it's a smaller triangle. Now here's the kicker. You want to soften hardwoods. Now this is just poplar, but it's the same with oaks and stuff like that. And I've gotten away from using water, and I just use an alcohol. So I'm just going to soak it in real quickly. I've also discovered that both my coordination and eyes are not what they used to be. In that draw boring video, I just took this very hammer and I just kind of started whacking on it. Nowadays, what I've gotten away from is I'll still use this mallet, but I like it because it's got a little wood thing on the side, so it doesn't really damage mine. And I will sit here and I will strike that. And I'm just kind of pressing it down, and those 3 strikes pretty much did it. So what we're doing is we're looking right here, and you can see I cut my dovetails a little bit proud, not too much, but just a little bit to give me this flexibility. So it's slightly wet, so it's slightly softened. I take the mallet, I place it right on the corner, making sure that the dome portion is on it, not an edge, and I just give that a slight hit. And it just kind of pushes the fibers over. Here's a much bigger gap. So I'll wet it, and then this time I'm not going to start on the very corner. I'm going to kind of hope that I get that dome a little bit away, is because I'm going to slowly work my way over. And I'm just kind of pushing the wood fibers over a little bit. Can you see where the indentation's going? It's just kind of pushing it a little bit. Now, once again, this one might be a little bit too much, but it'll work somewhat. Slowly working it over. And now take it and do the other side to close it up that last little bit. Voila, just like that. Let's clean up the protrusion. And there you go. How somebody with a little bit of knowledge that he's applying from otherwhere else can get a somewhat tight-fitting joint, having not cut a dovetail in about a year. Peening, using just brute force to push fibers in the direction you want to make it a little bit better. Doesn't do a lot of work, but in certain situations, it's an option. And that's something that if you gather information, no matter how good a skill you develop, if you're not applying that information where it's appropriate, you're not going to reach those upper echelons, are you? Well, I hope you enjoyed this. Something a little bit different, something we've not talked about much, but smashing wood together works sometimes. Y'all be safe, have fun, and remember, it's always worth the effort to learn, create stuff, share it with others.